We have an excellent guest from the United States, all the way over from the United States, Mr. Luis Fernando Mises. How did you get your name, Mr. Mises?
Well, I really like Ludwig von Mises, so I use his last name, as a barrier to protect my client work and the consulting firm where I work versus, all the activism that takes place because there's like so much hate. I guess if you do your work right, you get death threats and all sorts of crazy things. So, it's I guess a stage name, if you will.
Because you're a voluntarist, you're someone who's active in the voluntarist scene. What is the voluntarist scene over there? Is it growing? Is it contracting? What's the sort of state of the voluntarist scene?
Well, it's growing, but that doesn't mean that it's getting necessarily better. It's kind of funny. One of my friends from Houston, Kinsella, he said, I can miss the days when it was only 2,000 libertarians in the world. And it's funny because there's a lot of people actually that call themselves that, libertarians, voluntarists, anarchists, but I think it's actually a bit of a dysfunctional way to say, like, to put the blame of their inadequacies or like lack of whatever, intellect or purpose, and they blame the state for all of their, horrible things that's happening in their lives. So while it's growing, it's also, so there's some of that. So that's kind of, the work where I like to focus on um, the inner journey, inner work, like there's a point when you wake up and you realize how, the good guys are the bad guys and the bad guys are the good guys, and you get angry and you don't know what to do. And, so like channeling all the anger could be a good thing, but if you not just channel it, if you do the transmutation and you're able to go inwards and see all the representations, in your psyche and how they work outside. Whenever you start actually doing that really, really difficult work, things change inside. So, and the world outside changes as well. Kind of like goes what Gandhi talked about: be the change that you want to see. So it's a pretty interesting thing how all that works.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, so we'll just jump into the first news item. And the first big news item there was yesterday in the United States, 4th of July, basically independence from the UK. How was 4th of July? What happened? Was there any big events? Anything? Give us the update straight from the United States.
Well, I mean, I'm in Dallas, Texas, so it's a pretty American city, if you will. Normal stuff. I think it's funny that, like, there's a lot of animosity with how people use the flag, but at the same time, people wear the flag with shirts and shorts and napkins. So, there is not a lot of consistency, which is kind of funny. But other than that, I think that a lot of people don't necessarily love freedom. They just love the representation of freedom, you know? So, it's kind of like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm all about freedom as long as it's legal. I mean, that's not what freedom is all about, So it's an interesting thing. And obviously, everybody does their barbecue, hot dogs, and, swimming. So all that is so fine and dandy, nothing wrong with it. But it's just kind of funny how we are falling asleep again, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Americans. It was founded on a pretty much a libertarian constitution, and it's been going the other way ever since. And now, if you sort of disobey the ever increasing elite militarized police force, you're seen as someone stepping outside of the mold of freedom, which is exactly what George Orwell would have wrote about. He would have said something along the lines of they give you the, I don't know if this isn't a quote, but it's like they give you the bounds of freedom in which you can live. So, for example, if you're a bird outside in the real world and you're flying around, you understand the full context. But you're with a bird within an aviary, okay, yeah, you might be safe from some diseases or and some external predators and some other things because you're being looked after by people. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're free, even though you can flock within a certain geographical area, right? It's sort of the same thing. These people are in an aviary and saying, oh, well, at least we get all the benefits of not being attacked by predators. But really, they haven't seen the real world. It's a huge world out there. Is that how you sort of see it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the question that always pops up is, so who will build the roads? You know, like that's the question that always happens. So, well, it's funny because the government doesn't build the roads. They just act as a project manager of sorts between the citizens and the actual building companies, you know, the construction companies, and they charge a really pricey tag, you know, as project managers. So yeah, it's interesting how, you know, like you said, how it works. Now there's something, you know, back the founding fathers said, you're gonna have this republic if you can keep it, you know. So there's a book that I read about the civilizations when they collapsed, the collapse of major civilizations or something like that, and it talks about how, you know, there's rough times that they create strong people, and strong people create abundance, and then abundance tends to create lazier people because they don't have to work as hard, and then that turns into what kills societies. You know, if you can think of the Roman Empire, or, you know, also the Spanish crown and all of that stuff. So it seems like we are going in that direction, and it's kind of scary at some point. So you know, what we do is we try to tell people, you know, we need to wake up. We need to realize that, like, it's like a snake eating its own tail. We're going to get to that point where what the hell is going to happen? So you need to be mindful, and because we've had such amazing times, people live in a bubble, and they're like you said, you know, they don't really know what's outside of that bubble, and they start creating these relations. They have two choices, you know. They say, well, freedom, that's all we have. So if they go towards security, you lose your freedom. But at the same time, you don't really get security, because you cannot, like, you know, I mean, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, not even God could leave the snakes out of the Garden of Eden. So it's going to be like preposterous to think that with all the regulations and laws, we're going to just be in a safe environment. So by going for safety, we lose both. But if we go towards freedom, we're going to gain both. So it seems counterintuitive, but that's the way the United States worked for a couple hundred years.
Yeah, and there's also the idea. Well, Steve Bannon has been popularizing. I'm not sure if he came up with that, but he's definitely been popularizing the cycle of the end of civilizations. It's derived off a larger cycle, which was done by a British I think admiral, and he did about the 12 cycles from pioneers up to the last conspicuous consumers at the end of the empire. But yes, so you mentioned something. Interesting. So Adam and Eve, right? This is a founding doctrinal faith of the three major religions. Do you think that Americans, their idealization of current presidents and sitting members and political figures and governors and things, is this part of the problem? They idolize these characters. They put them on TV. They take everything they say way too seriously. They embed themselves in their lifestyle. I mean, is that part of the problem? Shouldn't they just be out there ignoring these people and saying, all right, whatever they're doing, I don't really care?
I think that now the president has so much power that it doesn't matter who the president is, because we can't do anything about it. But it's supposed to be is like the president, no matter who the president is, he does not have enough power to really move so much. Like, all they're supposed to be doing is like live public work, you know? So this has grown into a huge multi-headed monster. So, and another thing that I've noticed is, you know, here in the United States, we have the Republicans and Democrats, And I see that in the psyche, psychologically, for people that tend to root for Republicans, they tend to have more of a paternalistic view of life. You know, they have like this need of a daddy government to look after them. The Democrat side, they have more of like mommy issues. If you can start deeper into that. So depending on the regulations they create, you see the both sides, you know, mommy issues, daddy issues. And what I try to let people know is like you can do enough inner work to where you are not a baby that needs a mommy or daddy government to you, but you can be an actualized, self-actualized adult and, you know, do what needs to be done. So we over rely on this, and this happens all the time. You know, I'm a leadership development consultant, and you know, in a side of unhealthy things, we put all the trust, all the you know, on the leader, and we do anything. And then when they mess up, we become victims. Oh, you know, work, whatever. And if they, and you know, we over idolize them like right now, Trump. You know, so I mean, it's just completely like it's taking the power away from people. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're interested in psychedelics. So, tell us about psychedelics and what are they and how do they help and do they help and should they be illegal and go on.
Well, you know, psychedelics, the word psychedelics has maybe some negative connotations because of the hippies, you know, the 60s and 70s. So I like to use the word entheogens, which has kind of a similar meaning. Psychedelics means to manifest your soul, okay? Entheogen means to connect with the God within. Similar stuff, just, you know, different words for that purpose that I mentioned. I think that we are getting to know the world, universe. You know, Elon Musk is taking us to space. Jacques Cousteau took us to the bottom of the ocean. There's a lot of people exploring mountains, jungles, and all of that, but there's not a lot of searching inside ourselves. And I think that whenever we are actually doing the search inside ourselves, we're able to get more fulfillment, and not just more fulfillment, but like we find more peace, we find more gratefulness, we find more love, and we lose a lot of fear as well. We lose, I mean, I'm not saying all the fear because every emotion has its purpose, but we're able to find how we are interconnected with everything, you know? So I think the importance of that is a lot of times we see the them versus us, you know, and when we are connected, when we feel that connection, we just see that they are another me. So I interact with them is very different because I'm not trying to prove, trying to say, or to what I'm to create a pool of shared meaning where we all can win. So away from the in control, the you win, you lose, in a win-win situation, and where everybody is able to, you know, being wrong doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Being wrong mean that you get to, you know. So there's things that can get better through the usage of self-knowledge with entheogens.
So, there's different types of sort of psychedelic experiences born out of different uses of different drugs. So, for example, DMT or the dimethyltryptamine or mushrooms or you can have ayahuasca, for example. And I feel like what you're saying, ayahuasca is usually talked about with this interconnectedness with the Mother Nature. Usually, the spirit goddess or something shows herself, and it describes Mother Nature. There's also more down there in Peru. A bunch of them. So, which one is there a scale of important and more important, or are they different experiences which should all happen at different times in someone's life, or should they just be intellectually thought about and conceived, or what's your idea about how to utilize these these different experiences?
I think, see, the way, in my experience, you don't find entheogens, they find you when you're ready. So whenever they are in your consciousness, there is a draw, a pull that takes you to them. So is there a hierarchy of which one to use for what? Not really. It's just depending on which you call, which one shows in your life. I started, doing partaking with entheogens back in 2010, and that was something that really transformed my life for the better. I also, did my yoga certification, and so all those things and meditation, they've totally transformed my life. Like I used to have anger problems. Like I used to have, I'm a big city person. Road rage was the thing, So I went from that to being present. And I think that that's what you want to get out of all of this, to be present, to be yourself. Because oftentimes, when you're doing something, your mind is somewhere else. You're eating and you're probably thinking about what you should have said in the office, or, so like we are always somewhere else, seems like. So what these plans help you do is we're fragmented in the past experiences. So it's like a soul retrieval. You go back to one place, and then it depends, what plant talks to you in that sense. So ayahuasca is more like a mother spirit, in the sense that like the energy is like a female. As for instance, San Pedro Calles, he's been really big influence on me. That's a masculine essence too. Psilocybin, that one, it feels earthy. I would not know how to explain gender, but it feels just earthy. And ultimately, like from my mother's side of the family, the lineage apparently has some shaman that, like, my mom is like half native and half Spaniard too, because that's most Mexicans anyway. But the from that side of the family, like one of those guys was a shaman that worked with mushrooms, and so I've been connecting with him, grandpa, and learning a lot of that, I guess, lineage. So it's actually been quite fun, and that just opens another universe in itself, because you're able to see that the electromagnetic field that we're with these, like these guys, they help you a whole lot more, and you can see, behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. You can see how important it is to have a clean intention, how important it is to be present, and I don't know that there's a hierarchy on the teaching plans, but I think that
It's
maybe
like
trying to.
it's like when you're starving, or when your body knows what to eat, you just eat. You just have a calling to that particular type of food, because your body knows what nutrients it needs. And you're saying that on a spiritual level, and a psychophysical level, and an emotional level, and an intellectual level, and you get a calling to a certain pseudoscience, psycho-spiritual entheogen, right? So you have a void in your life, and you need to fill that void, and you'll get called to a certain plant, whether it be peyote or psilocybin or DMT. DMT is the center of the mandala, as Terence McKenna explains. He says this is the hardest drug. Is it safe? Is it safe to? Would you say it should be safe for people to consume it, even if they are voluntarist, or should they? Should we really wait for more scientific study from the government? Because I know that people say, oh, the government never does scientific study, but I've actually read a study where they got 50 control patients, and they actually dripped DMT into their veins for a while, and that was fascinating. But so, what do you think? Do you think that some drugs are too unsafe? DMT, for example, which is the most extreme, I guess.
See, DMT is there. You have it, I have it, plants have it, all the animals. It's something that releases when you're being born, and when you're about to die, and sometimes at night when you're sleeping. So this is, to me, that means that it is totally safe if everybody has it. So if we start from that, then move on to the idea, like when you're taking ayahuasca, when you're taking all of these substances, that's basically what's getting into your body, the DMT. Now, just the extraction of DMT and taking it by itself, it's um, it's something that lasts 15 minutes. But in my opinion, it's really hard to do work in 15 minutes, like, because this is something that takes you so deep inside. And a lot of times in 15 minutes, you go in and you kind of like, I don't know what the fuck I just saw because I don't understand anything. So just to have a little bit of time. I was like actually did one time 5-MeO DMT, which is called like the Jaguar medicine. And that's about an hour and a half, which is perfect if you want to have like a short amount of work, but enough to where it's deep and substantial and you're able to understand a lot of things, So from that, ayahuasca is like 5 hours. And if we move to San Pedro cactus, it's probably like 9 hours. Mushrooms is, 4 hours I take it. So I don't think that one has.
We've seemed to lost you.
Can you hear me?
Hang on, we've seemed to
Can you hear
lost
me?
you. We've seemed to lost. Oh, you're still here. You're still here. Just your internet's a bit choppy.
Oh. Am I back? Hello?
Hello. Yeah, no, you're still here. All right, so let's try that again.
So, what was the thing you heard?
Talking about the government.
Oh, yeah. So I don't wait for them to tell me if or not, So what I do is I go for peer and anything of that sort that could help. I would totally advise that people don't do this alone, at least for the first 5 times, because it's pretty difficult. Like you get to a point where sometimes it's hard to go pee, or if you're purging because there's purge happens. If it's intense, you need somebody to help you. So there's a bunch of shamans everywhere in the world. Like you don't have to just go to Peru for this. So again, like I was telling you, ayahuasca doesn't find you. I mean, you don't find ayahuasca finds. So if we just keep our feelers open, it shows up. So yeah, this safety situation, I would go for somebody that actually has done it many times and they can give me experiences instead of just asking for the state.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. So peaceful parenting is something you're big on. Touch on that. What is peaceful parenting? Give it to the context of a global audience, because I kind of know what you mean, but it has a little bit of a different reverb out here.
Well, the idea of peaceful parenting is that your children are not your property, and you treat them as such. You treat them as individual sovereign beings. So, there's there is no violence. It's like the primordial idea is that you're going to treat them with love, and there is no spanking. And a lot of people is like, well, how do you discipline them? So there's a difference between punishment and discipline. It's a vast difference. So what you do is like you talk with them basically. So like I don't tell them like you're gonna listen to me just because I'm your dad, because like I personally hated that growing up. Whenever my parents didn't use that, but when I would hear other people say that, that's preposterous. You have to respect people to be respected, not just because you have a title. That's stupid. So whenever, like with my kids, I respect them and they respect me. I treat them the way, they deserve, without any hitting or any of that sort. And that's in a nutshell what it is. So some people say, well, so how do you get them to do things without, forcing them or punishing them? I'm like, well, if it's a good idea, they're gonna do it anyway. And there's something that's called the emotional bank account that comes from Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And the emotional bank account is like you basically make deposits in their account whenever you shower them with love and care, and you give them words of affirmation, and then whenever you ask them to do something, they're gonna do it because there's enough deposits that you've made that you can take a withdrawal as well. And the same thing happens for them. Like I listen to their music in the car. It's not just about me. Like the idea that as a parent, you're not trying to grow another you, but to basically is like a trust fund, and you're the fiduciary that's take care of that trust fund so it can go on its own later. So I mean, it's because a lot of people minds are just blown away by the fact that you have to care about kids as individuals and not as little mini me's, if you will.
Yeah, I understand that. So does this notion of peaceful parenting go hand in hand? Does it coalesce with sort of homeschooling, or are you unable to allow the state to take your children for, I don't know, what is it, like 6 hours a day or something, because you're handing them over to what voluntarists and libertarians call a violent entity, right? So do these two work together, peaceful parenting, homeschooling, or are they different? Are they are you still able to send your children to state schools?
I see. I would not be the enemy of my children. So I don't send them to government school. We do quite a bit of schooling for several years. My daughter is 14, and back, we found school. We used to go to a private school when she was little, 4 to 7, and then 7 to 14 we homeschooling, and back to another private school. So that private school next. So, I mean, it's not, parenting is necessary. Bullying, it just is for kids, like I want to treat them like they deserve.
All right. Hey, look, I'm just going to cut it down because we're almost at time, and the internet is a little bit poor. So, but that's okay because we'll fix that at next time, and we'll have a great discussion next time as well because this is super interesting stuff. Coming from a voluntarist perspective, it's really interesting. Our topic's 4th of July, psychedelics, and I want to talk to you more about entheogens as well, and how they could help to heal, and whether or not I'll ask you whether or not politicians should have to take them, as a grounding mechanism, as an earthing mechanism, and also stoned ape theory and a whole bunch more. So we'll definitely do all that. We'll get the internet cleaned up a little bit. That'll be really good. But thank you very much, Mr. Mises, for coming on. And it's been great anyway.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, the internet kind of sucks a little bit, so hopefully next time, I don't know what's happening, we'll make it work better.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and that's Detonation, and thanks to Unshackled.net. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, people.